Hi, welcome back. I'm Annette Dubrouillet, and we're moving on to Chapter 11 of The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. If you remember in Chapter 10, Mary had just introduced Dickon to the Secret Garden. Chapter 11 is entitled The Nest of the Missel Thrush. Boy, is that a mouthful. Try to say that fast 3 times. The Nest of the Missel Thrush. For 2 or 3 minutes, Dickon stood looking round him while Mary watched him, and then he began to walk softly, even more lightly than Mary had walked for the first time she had found herself inside the 4 walls. His eyes seemed to be taking in everything, the gray trees with the gray creepers climbing over them and hanging from their branches, the tangle on the walls and among the grass, the evergreen alcoves with the stone seats and the tall flower urns standing in them. "I never thought I'd see this place," he said at last in a whisper. "Did you know about it?" asked Mary. She had spoken aloud, and he made a sign to her. "We must talk slow," he said, "or someone will hear us wondering what's doing in here." "Oh, I forgot," said Mary, feeling frightened and putting her hand quickly against her mouth. "Did you know about the garden?" she asked again when she had recovered herself. Dickon nodded. "Martha told me about it when there was no one ever inside," he answered. "Us used to wonder what it was like." He stopped and looked around at the lovely gray tangle about him, and his round eyes looked queerly happy. "Aye, the nest'll be here come a springtime," he said. "It'll be the safest nesting place in England. No one never come near a tangle of trees and roses to build in. I wonder all the birds in the moor don't build here." Mistress Mary put her hand on his arm again without knowing it. "Will there be roses?" she whispered. "Can you tell? I thought perhaps they were all dead." "I? No, not them, not all of them," he answered. "Look here." He stepped over to the nearest tree, an old one with gray lichen all over its bark, but upholding a certain tangled spray and branches. He took a thick knife out of his pocket and opened it on one of its blades. "There are a lot of dead wood as ought to be cut out," he said, "and there's a lot of old wood, but it made some new last year. There's here a bit of new," and he touched a shoot which looked brownish green instead of hard, dry gray. Mary touched it herself in an eager, reverent way. "That one," she said. "Is that one quite coming alive? Quite?" Dickon curved his wide, smiling mouth. "As a wick as you and me," he said, and Mary remembered that Martha had told her that wick meant alive or lively. "I'm glad it's wick," she cried out in her whisper. "I want all of them to be wick. Let's go round the garden and count how many wick ones there are." She quite panted with eagerness, and Dickon was as eager as she was. They went from tree to tree and bush to bush. Dickon carried his knife in his hand and showed her things which she thought wonderful. "They've run wall," he said, "but the strongest ones have thrived on it. The delicate ones has died out, but the others has grown and spread till there's a wonder. See here." And he pulled down a thick, gray, dry-looking branch. "I bet he might think this was dead wood, but I don't believe it. It is down to the root. I'll cut it low down and see." He knelt and with his knife cut the lifeless-looking branch through, not far above the earth. "There," he said exultantly. "I told thee, there's green in that wood yet. Look at it." Mary was down on her knees before he spoke, gazing with all her might. "When it looks a bit greenish and juicy like that, it's wick," he explained. "When the inside is dry and breaks easy, like this here piece I've cut off, it's done for. There's a big root here, as all this life wood sprung out of it, as if the wood cut off and it's dug around. and took care of there'll be. He stopped and lifted his face to look up at the climbing and the hanging sprays above him. There'll be a fountain of roses here this summer. They went from bush to bush and from tree to tree. He was very strong and very clever with his knife and knew how to cut the dry, dead wood away, and could tell when an upcoming promising bough or twig still had green life in it. In the course of half an hour, Mary thought she could tell too, and when he cut through a lifeless-looking branch, she would cry out joyfully under her breath when she caught sight of the least shade of moist green. The spade and hoe and fork were very useful. He showed her how to use the fork while he dug about the roots with the spade and stirred the earth and let the air in. They were working industriously round one of the biggest standard roses when he caught sight of something which made him exclaim in surprise. "Oh," he said, pointing to the grass a few feet away. "Who did that there?" It was one of Mary's own clearings around the pale green points. "I did it," said Mary. "Why, I thought I didn't know nothing about gardening," he exclaimed. "I don't," she answered. "But they were so little, and the grass was so thick and strong, they looked as if they had no room to breathe. So I made a place for them. I don't even know what they are." Dickon went and knelt down by them, smiling his wide smile. "That was right," he said. "A gardener couldn't have done it better. They'll grow like Jack's beanstalks. They're crocus and snowdrops, and these here's narcissus," turning to another patch, "and these here daffydown dillies. Aye, they will be a sight." He ran from one clearing to another. "That has done a lot of work for such a little wrench," he said, looking her over. "I'm growing faster," said Mary, "and I'm growing stronger. I used to always be tired. When I dig, I'm not tired at all. I like to smell the earth when it's turned up." "It's rare good for thee," he said, nodding his head wisely. "There's not as nice as the smell of good clean earth, except the smell of fresh growing things when the rain falls on 'em. I get out in the warm many a day when it's raining, and I lie under a bush and listen to the soft swish of drops in the heather, and I just sniff and sniff, and my nose in fair quivers like a rabbit's, Mother says." "Do you never catch cold?" inquired Mary, gazing at him wonderingly. She had never seen such a funny boy or such a nice one. "Not me," he said, grinning. "I never catch it cold since I was born. I wasn't brought up nesh enough. I've chased about the moor in all weathers, same as the rabbits does. Mother says I've sniffed up too much fresh air for 12 years to ever go sniffing with cold. I'm as tough as a whistle-thorn knobstick." He was working all the time and was talking with, and Mary was following him and helping him with all her fork and the trowel. "There's a lot of work to do there," he said once, looking about quite exultantly. "Will you come again and help me do it?" begged Mary. "I'm sure I can help too. I can dig and pull weeds and do whatever you tell me. Oh, do come, Dickon." "I'll come every day if that wants, rain or shine," he answered stoutly. "It's the best fun I've ever had in my life, shutting here and waking up a garden." "If you will come," said Mary, "if you will help me make it alive, I don't know what I'll do," she ended helplessly. What could she do for a boy like that? "I'll tell ye what they'll do," he said with his happy grin. "They'll get fat and they'll get hungry and as a young fox, and they'll learn how to talk the robin, same as I do. Aye, we will have lots of fun." He began to walk about, looking up at the trees and as the walls and the bushes with a thoughtful expression. "I wouldn't want to make it look like a gardener's garden, all clipped and spick and span, would you?" he said. "It's nicer with the things running wild and swinging and catching hold of each other." "Don't let's make it tidy," said Mary anxiously. "It would seem like a secret garden if it wouldn't seem like a secret garden if it was tidy." Dickon stood rubbing his rusty red head with a rather puzzled look. "It's a secret garden, sure enough," he said. "But it seems like sometimes Someone besides a robin has been in here since it was shut up 10 years ago. But the door was locked, and the key was buried, said Mary. No one could get in. That's true, he answered. It's a queer place. Seems to me as if there'd been a bit of pruning done here and there later in 10 years. But how could have been done? Said Mary. He was examining a branch of standard rose and shook his head. Oh, how could it? He murmured, with a door lock and a key buried. Mistress Mary always felt that however many years she lived, she should never forget that first morning when her garden began to grow. Of course, it did seem to begin to grow for her that morning. When Dickon began to clear the place to plant seeds, she remembered what Basil had sung at her when he wanted to tease her. Are there any flowers that look like bells? She inquired. Lily of the valleys does, he answered, digging away with the trowel. And there's Canterbury bells and campanulas. Let's plant some, said Mary. There's lily of the valley already here. I saw 'em. They'll have grown too close and we'll have to separate 'em, but there's plenty. The other ones take 2 years to bloom from seed, but I can bring you some bits of plants from our cottages. What does it want them? Why does it want them? Then Mary told him about Basil and his brothers and sisters in India and how she had hated them, and all of their calling her Mistress Mary quite contrary. They used to dance around and sing at me. They'd sing, Mistress Mary quite contrary, how does your garden grow? With silver bells and cockle shells and marigolds all in a row. I just remembered it, and that made me wonder if there were really flowers like silver bells. She frowned a little and gave her trowel a rather spiteful dig into the earth. I wasn't as contrary as they were. But Dickon laughed. Aye, he said, as he crumbled the rich black earth, and she saw that he was sniffing up the scent of it. There doesn't seem to be no need for no one to be contrary with his flowers, and such like, and such lots of friendly wild things running and making homes for themselves, and building nests, and singing and whistling, does there? Mary, kneeling beside him, holding the seeds, looked up at him and stopped frowning. Dickon, she said, you are as nice as Martha said you were. I like you, and you make the 5th person. I never thought I should like 5 people. Dickon sat up on his heels as Martha did when she was polishing the grate. He did look funny and delightful, Mary thought, in his round blue eyes and red cheeks and happy turned-up nose. Only 5 folks I like, he said. Who's the other 4? Your mother and Martha, Mary checked off her fingers, and the robin and Ben Weatherstaff. Dickon laughed so that he was obliged to stifle the sound by putting his arm over his mouth. I know that thinks I'm a queer lad, he said, but I think that are queerest little lass I ever saw. Then Mary did a strange thing. She leaned forward and asked him a question she never dreamed of asking anyone before. And she tried to ask it in Yorkshire, because that was his language. And in India, a native was always pleased if you knew how to speak their language. Does thou like me? She said. Aye, he answered orderly, that I does. I like thee wonderful, and so does a robin, I do believe. That's 2 then, said Mary. That's 2 for me. And then they began to work harder and ever more joyfully. Mary was startled and sorry when she heard the big clock in the courtyard struck the hour of her midday meal. I shall have to go, she said mournfully. And you will have to go too, won't you? Dickon grinned. My dinner's easy to carry about with me, he said. I always put a bit of something in my pocket. He picked up his coat from the grass and brought out of the pocket a lumpy little bundle tied with a clean coarse blue and white handkerchief. It held 2 thick pieces of bread with a slice of something laid between them. It's a soft, not a bread, he said, but I've got a finer slice of fat bacon with it today. Mary thought it looked a queer dinner, but he seemed ready to enjoy it. Right on, get the victuals, he said. I'll be done with my first, but get some work done before I start coming back home. He sat down with his back against the tree. I'll call the robin up, he said, and give it a bit of rind of bacon to peck at. They likes a bit of fat so wonderful. Mary could scarcely bear to leave him. Suddenly it seemed as if it might be a sort of wood fairy who might be gone when she came back into the garden again. He seemed too good to be true. She went slowly halfway to the door in the wall, then she stopped and turned back. Whatever happens, you never will tell, she said. His poppy-colored cheeks were distended with his first big bite of bread and bacon, but he managed to smile encouragingly. If thou was a Missel Thrush and throwed me where thy nest were, does thou think I'll tell anybody? Not me, he said. Thou art as safe as a Missel Thrush. And she was quite sure she was. It's the end of chapter 11.